Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Wanted to welcome everyone to this evening's town hall meeting. My name's Chris Bahuli. I'm the Placer County Planning Director. This evening, we will be conducting a town hall meeting to provide an opportunity for the public to hear details about a proposed general plan policy amendment specific to solar panels in the 100-year floodplain. The purpose of this meeting is also to solicit feedback on that proposed policy change. Should mention that that there is a project that is being proposed. It's the Country Acres Solar Project. It will be mentioned as part of this presentation. However, we will not be providing or we will not be going into too much detail about the specific project. This town hall meeting is specific to the general plan policy amendment. Should note that the meeting is being recorded. It will be available on the county website. The notation for the county website is listed on the slide on the presentation. And that if anyone that is listening to the presentation via the remote option and would like to provide public comment on the general plan policy amendment, you are welcome to do so by submitting it to Jennifer Bias. Her email is listed on the slide. She will be presenting later on in this presentation and is the primary contact for the project. Wanted to spend a moment to introduce the key staff that are here that you will be hearing from this evening. To my left over here, we have Jennifer Bias, who I mentioned previously. She is a principal planner with the Planning Services Division. We have Chris Graham, who is a senior planner, also with the Planning Services Division. And we have Jeremy Sutter. He is with our Community Development Resource Agency as a real estate services manager. And then I also want to point out that we have Phil Franz, who is an engineering manager with our engineering surveying division. So wanted to point out those staff that will be speaking to you this evening. In terms of the format of the meeting, as I mentioned, there is a staff presentation that Jennifer Bias will be providing. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity for public question and comment. We will hear first from those members of the public that are here in attendance, and then we will move to the Zoom call and take public comment from the Zoom call. From there, then we will have an opportunity to answer questions, provide some additional closing comments from staff, and then we will wrap up the presentation. As I mentioned, the purpose is to provide information about the general plan policy amendment. That is going to be the primary purpose of the presentation, and again, that is specific to solar panels in the 100-year floodplain. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there is a specific project that is being proposed by the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, or SMUD. That is the Country Acres project. There will be some mention of the project during the presentation, but again, not in total detail. So with that, I am going to hand over the presentation to Ms. Bias.
Thank you, Jennifer Bias with Planning Services, here to present the item tonight. I did also want to mention that the presentation will also be posted on the website, as well as there's handouts here if anybody needs a handout to follow along. I'm going to jump right in. We'll kind of dive in to what's being proposed. We're talking about our health and safety element. And in that element, we have goals related to risks of loss and life and injury related to the floodplain. Specifically, we have policy 8B14 that states, it's up here, item number 2, bullet point number 2, new construction shall not be permitted within the 100-year floodplain. Within the 100 feet of the center line of a permanent stream, or within 50 feet of an intermittent stream, or within the 100-year floodplain, whichever is the greater distance. The proposed amendment is shown in underlined, so we're adding a clause to this statement that would look at this statement and point you to a new policy 8B113, which the new policy is stated below, and it is a rather lengthy policy. My next slide, we will break down what this policy is getting at. If anybody needs a copy of this, we actually also printed out copies of the actual language so you can kind of follow along on the next slide. But I'll go over what this policy is entailing. So the first item that this policy adds would be that for long-term, non-permanent solar electric generation projects, our zoning ordinance does define electric generating plants, and solar panel projects are considered electric generating plants and are permitted within certain zone districts with a conditional use permit. So the policy is pointing to these types of projects. Geographically locating these types of projects would be west of Highway 49. So there's some geographic limitations to the change in this policy. There's also vegetation and wetland impacts would have to be less than significant. So what we're really talking about here is where a floodplain has not been altered significantly, and then grading and increases to the surface water elevation would be considered minimal, as well as the stream where the floodplain is would not be anadromous fish bearing. And we'll break this down a little farther as we go through the presentation. But an anadromous fish, just in case you're wondering, is a species of fish. It's salmon, right? They go out to the ocean and then they come back in as part of their life cycle to reproduce in freshwater. Floodplain depths and velocities would basically not make it safe to place the solar panels in the areas that we're talking about. So the language there is getting at, again, when you anchor the panels to the ground, the floodwaters would not be expected to displace those panels due to force and velocity of the flooding. So looking a little bit more detailed at the analysis of what this change to our general plan means, we took into some considerations to come up with some numbers of, well, where does this actually mean our change would take effect? And in doing that, we looked at the FEMA maps, the floodplain maps that are generated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And then we also have some detailed data on our stream systems, our watersheds, and where areas are in the county that are considered non-anadromous. We have 7 watersheds in West Placer. There's some waterways in Bear River, Markham Ravine, and Pleasant Grove that actually qualify as non-anadromous waterways. And I have a map of that. I'll show the locations in a moment. Zoning districts, again, solar generating projects, solar electric generating projects are limited also as a land use to certain zone districts. So when you do your GIS analysis where you overlay the zone districts and to where it would be allowed with your data from the floodplain and the anadromous fish, we come to a total of around 3,268 acres broken into the farm, residential agriculture, and then again, regional university specific plan zone. That would be potential areas that somebody could propose a project. I did want to note that we have looked again at country acres, and we have some additional information in the presentation, and approximately about 84 acres of their proposed project would be in an area that would be covered in this policy. Again, breaking down Highway 49 West and the 100-year floodplain shown here in the blue. Both shades are identifying the 100-year floodplain for the FEMA data, and then the darker blue is the anadromous fish habitat. And then when you overlay that with our zoning for farm, residential agriculture, and then I did highlight down in green here, regional university is also included in that. But the green areas are really the areas that we would say that a future project may be considered in this related to this policy change. I don't have it on this map. This is just showing a general where, based on the GIS data, where would this potentially, the change potentially affect. So the solar panel project's not on here. I do have slides for that. So hang on. So getting into the questions about the floodplain, and when we were talking as staff of what would be concerning about modifying this policy, we talked about making sure that up and downstream property owners would not be affected. So through the conditional use permit process, we would add a condition of approval. Again, that would require demonstrating that you wouldn't be altering the flood's water on adjacent properties should a project like this be considered in the future. Also, again, the policy change does not allow for habitable structures in the floodplain. So the solar panels are considered non-habitable structures. So that's similar to what we already allow by our flood prevention ordinance. And then talking a little bit about after the long-term use and a decommissioning plan where this panels might be removed from an area, that the floodplain would be restored to be consistent with the general plan floodplain policies, and again, the habitat protection and restoration general plan policies that also already exist. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the Country Acres solar panel project and a little bit of background on the project. The project is proposing to construct and operate, again, a photovoltaic power generating facility. Maximum production, 344 megawatts, renewable energy with some battery storage, about 172 megawatts, 4 hours of energy. That project is proposed over 1,107 acres in West Placer. The project will include the solar modules, as well as a collecting system, inverters, energy storage, battery system, substations, switch stations, and interconnecting lines. There's also additional components for fencing, lighting, access to the project or to the solar panel sites, and some other telecommunications and additional items that would be placed in the area for the project. I could read here the meteorological station. I'm on slide 9. Telecommunications, and again, I already mentioned the transmission system and some network upgrades that they would do to the transmission system. Yeah. Construction of the project, if approved, they would expect their timeline for construction to be 18 months to 2 years, with the construction projected to start in 2004 and extend into 2006. Again, getting into the regional location here shown on the map in gray. It's a little difficult to see, maybe a little small, but it is there. Those are the locations of the solar panels. We're in West Placer, west of the city of Roseville, north of the Sacramento County line. Sacramento County line. City of Roseville, we're west of that. And again, located between rural Lincoln Mac and the West Placer Advisory Council boundaries. Again, project vicinity, and then getting into a little bit more details of the project map that's been provided. Shown here in the black hashed area will be the proposed locations, general locations of the solar panel, with the yellow as the connecting roadway to provide connection from Philippe Road and Baseline Road. Also shown there in the orange is their connection route that would feed the power generated down to their collection system, which is their best yard. That's their battery storage yard, as well as their switch station. I believe the battery storage is in the orange hash, and the switch station is shown in the red cross-hashed. I can't say that word. The switch station would then tie into their existing transmission lines, which is shown in the blue, and connect the power into the power grid. Again, talking a little bit about how this policy change would work with the proposed Country Acres project. Shown here in the blue is our floodplain, and the various shades represent different depths of flooding that would be projected in these areas. This is shown here in the red box with the black overlying. Red boxes with the black overlying would be where the panels would be intersecting with floodplains. The shaded black panels would be with the blue. This location, I don't think it's a perfect rectangle in there. And then this location, again, not a perfect rectangle, but to just highlight where the proposed project is proposing to have panels located in the 100-year floodplain. Also noting that the depth of flooding in these areas range from typically 1 foot to below. And this is some examples of what we'd expect to see with the solar project being proposed in this area. They have provided a CEQA document. So they have acted, SMUD being the lead agency, has provided a public with the document Environmental Impact Report that was certified by and adopted by their board last April. The county has participated in that process with the development of that document, but as we progress into our entitlement review, our decision makers will also have to take action to certify the environmental document that's been provided. A complete environmental document, including response to any comments that were received, is available at this link if you would like to see the impacts and proposed responses to the project. Again, the entitlements that are being proposed with this project that the county will be considering for the Country Acres projects would include a conditional use permit for the operation of the power generating plant within the farm zone district. They're also proposing some amendments to the regional university specific plan. And that amendment would change the allowance for the solar panels to be constructed prior to a master plan being completed for the university. And again, the general plan amendment that is being proposed here is again to modify policy 8B14 and add a new policy 8B113 as the language we showed earlier in the presentation. That would allow certain areas to allow solar panels in certain areas of the floodplain. And that is our simple presentation. And we're available for any comments or questions if you have any. Also listed here again, there is a web page that is available for additional information and my email if you wanted to provide additional comments. So with that, we can go into public comments. Are you gonna back up?
So again, the way that we'll handle public comments is first, any members in the audience that want to provide public comment or ask questions, followed by, we have a number of people on the Zoom call, and we'll take folks from the Zoom call. So anyone that is on Zoom, if they wanted to raise their hand, they should do so now so that we know who would like to provide comment or ask questions. And with that, I'll turn it over. I'm assuming Mr. Garbedian, that you'd like to make a comment or ask a question? Okay, you want to come up to the...
First of all, the handout is black and white, and what you showed is color. Do you have color maps to show us? For instance, on this black and white, you can't tell the depth or anything. You know, there's blue and dark blue. It would be good to have that in my hand right now. If there's a color map like that. Maybe the county ran out of a color printer for some of us? Or the budget is too tight? Well, then you, thank you. So I guess I have a variety of questions. First of all, it looks like there's going to be obstruction in the path of the flowing water. A fence, a chain link fence across the obstruction, and then the facility itself. Will that be blocking the flow of debris or something? So that's one question. So you plan to answer them later or something like that?
I think if you can list out all your questions, then we can provide a response to them.
Okay, well, I'm assuming there's a good reason for these policies that are being changed. And I'm not sure what the reason is that they are being changed for this project. So what is the destination of the electricity generated? It's apparently important to be near the power line. Is it going to be used locally or sent to Sacramento or that? And is this project benefiting from using the Placer County Conservation Plan, which is which people from Sacramento should understand? The PCCP does not follow the Natural Communities Conservation Plan of California in the Fish and Game Code. It requires landscape level ecosystem protection. Instead, PCCP is allowing any projects like this to have landscape level ecosystem destruction if they pay a fee. And it's not clear that the fees if you're paying fees through PCCP or through the Placer Conservation Authority, that that's actually going to, the question is that actually going to pay for the mitigation? Now this is, it says it is not, there is not anadromy in this area now. Is it possible? Is it eligible? Has it had anadromous fish in the past? And could it have anadromy in the future? Am I out of time or what?
If you have some more questions, keep going.
Okay. I'd be glad to let other people go and continue. Whoops, this is not mine. So it seems to me there ought to be a very large weight to overcome to make this kind of a change. I mean, why and how does it have to be here in this location with this strange alignment? You know, what generated the alignment? Is it property ownerships or what? How does it need to be in this configuration? And mainly, why does it have to be in a location where it requires these kind of changes to the county policy? The language is extremely, shall we say, wishy-washy, because let's see, as long as impacts the wetlands are less than significant. Well, what does that mean, less than significant? And they comply with the applicable flood claim and grading areas. Well, that may be fairly easy. But it says that the surface elevations are minor. What does that mean, minor? Is there a way to measure on that? Is there, in terms of water flow or erosion potential or anything? And I've raised the anadromy question, if it is a possibility, if it's had it in the past. And then there are the question of preventing collapse or movement of the improvements in the floodplain. It seems to me there's a rather large burden to overcome about why this need to be built in a floodplain at all. I mean, what is the reason? Why does it have to be there in a floodplain when there are plenty of areas that aren't in a floodplain, I assume, that could be built? And I say this, being a person who lived in Salado County for 12 years before SMUD went in and put in their windmills, which are totally consistent with the kind of agriculture that went in there, the rotating sheep and I think it was grain crops and that kind of thing. And instead we have something here where the question is, what is the agricultural history on this line, this land, and is it what's happening to that use? What are the soil types? What is the soil quality? And so when it comes to what is the time frame? Apparently this has a time frame. What is the potential time frame in terms of years and so forth? And then when it gets to that point, how is it remediated? How is it brought back into not affecting the floodplain? And there, of course, with the climate change, we know that there is a change in weather coming. So this floodplain may be out of date. It may not serve. One other question is really questionable to have to do something like this in a flood zone, which may be changing during the life of this project. So that makes it really critical to know what the potential life of the project is. So you've covered a couple of these things, the construction period, and the frequency of flooding now, that would be good to know. I think I'd like to come back later and not just hog the whole program tonight.
I think what we'll do is we'll see if there's anyone else that has any questions. We can provide a response to some of the questions that you've raised, and then we're happy to, after the conclusion of the program, that we can stick around and answer follow-up questions as well.
Well, I'd like to continue in this manner if possible, rather than stand up here and sort of filibuster.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, if there are any callers on the Zoom, if you'd like to provide comment or ask questions, if you could please raise your hand.
We also have one caller on the telephone. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand by pressing *9.
Judy, it doesn't appear we have any questions or comments, right?
That is correct. For the moment, we have no hands being raised by our Zoom callers.
Okay. As I noted earlier in the presentation, the primary focus for this evening's town hall meeting is on the general plan policy amendment. However, as our presentation noted, we did go into a little bit of detail about the proposed Country Acres project. Given that most of the, or all of the questions that were asked, or most of the questions that were asked, I should say, related to the actual project, we will provide responses to those questions. I should also note that when we do take this project to the Placer County Planning Commission, that there will be a full presentation and analysis on a number of the questions that were raised during the question and comment period. But I will at this time turn it back over to Jennifer Baez, who can go through and answer a number of the questions that were brought up earlier.
Great, and I will defer some of the flooding questions to engineering and surveying, Phil Franz, but I did kind of want to address, I think one of the questions I heard was, is the project benefiting from the Placer County Conservation Program? And just noting that this project actually is not a covered activity in the conservation plan. However, our policies, our goal is to align the proposed project with the goals and policies of the conservation plan and program, but it is not a covered activity under that program. Your question about the anadromous fish in the future, they may come into those watersheds. I think some of those areas were identified because they are above dams. Ultimately, yes, those dams could be modified and changed to allow fish to go back into the stream systems. So yes, anadromous fish could come in the future, but currently are not there. My other items was kind of related to your questions on the agricultural history and the site configuration. The site configuration of the proposed Country Acres solar panel is applicant proposed. This is how they're proposing to lay out their project. And we will get into that further as we present analysis to the Planning Commission. Again, the history of agriculture in this area. West Placer has been historically agriculture. Most of the properties that are contained within the Country Acres project have been either farmed for rice and or current under production for almonds. And we'll again have additional information as that relates as the project comes forward. And I don't think I stated it, but the proposal that's being requested for the conditional use permit would be a 35-year time frame for the Country Acres project. And then I was going to have Phil address some of the questions related to the flood panels. Flooding.
All right, thank you, Jen. I think I heard two questions about floodplain and the flow of the water. I'll start with the comment about the fence. While there may be fencing within the floodplain, we will be taking a look at that fencing to ensure that the flow of water is not significantly impeded. In fact, there's also, I think, a gap at the bottom of the fence for small animals, which would also accommodate some flows. And so the fencing design can get looked at during the improvement plan process so we can ensure that there will not be any significant obstruction of 100-year stormwater flows. And then there was a question about the depth of the floodplain and what's considered minor. The policy itself kind of establishes a framework of what those requirements might be. Any project coming into this policy would need to get a use permit, and I believe, Jen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, would need to go through the environmental review process, in which we would look at those impacts to determine what is less than significant or not. And generally within the floodplain, if the water surface elevation is changing up to 1 foot, we would consider that to be minor or less than significant. And we typically have requirements that the floodplain water surface elevation upstream and downstream of the proposed project site cannot change. So while they might be able to change it within their project boundaries, they wouldn't be impacting anybody upstream or downstream with the floodplain limits and water surface elevation. And I think those were the two questions that I had. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there was another one. Sorry, I overlooked it when you were asking about where the power generated from this project will go. It'll go ultimately into the SMUD's power grid, and their areas. They have a geographic boundary that is in West Placer, and then also down in Sacramento County. So that will be where the power will be utilized. I think those were all the questions that I think I said that. Time frame of the use permit, again, 35 years, what's being proposed. So I think that's it. Again, we're available after the presentation wraps up if you have additional questions. Also note that we're projecting this item would be presented at the Planning Commission for consideration the first part of January. So if you have more questions, you can follow up with an email and or again, attend the Planning Commission meeting.
Maybe before we wrap up, just one more request to see if there are any callers on the Zoom that want to raise their hand and provide a comment or question. Did you want to provide one more question? Okay, sure.
Just an observation for SMUD, and that is that Placer County has a media monopoly, and in each of the incorporated cities, it's the same company that is not particularly notable for informing the public about what's going on. The public engagement here is minimal to nothing. The environmental community has been compromised and really just set aside. So I'm sure that SMUD is used to being in a more confrontational and environment where it's tested better, and I hope that it's not hoping to take advantage of the fact that here we have a weak form of democracy here. In fact, sometimes I've called it a developocracy, because the county approves almost everything. It looks like the county and planning approves just about everything it can, virtually willy-nilly, without planning where it should go and when it should happen. And we are, unlike, for instance, the county I used to live in, Solano County, which did not allow municipal services to be developed in the unincorporated territory and left it up to the municipalities. So, yeah, this is a county that is pretty hostile to agriculture. Agriculture does not have as strong a voice as it used to have, and I want SMUD to know that they're getting into difficult territory here compared to what they're used to, and I really think they need to pay attention to that.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments and your questions, and would like to close the town hall meeting, and again, reference that this meeting has been recorded and will be available on our website. Thank you for attending.